AP World, today we're talking about interaction with the environment and technology in the post-classical era because they go hand in hand. So first, states develop technology and innovation. The most famous is going to be the four great innovations of China. Also, the Mongols developed the cannon. You have the building of like the largest stone wall in sub-Saharan Africa and Great Zimbabwe and these massive mounds of Cahokia. But for the most part, states and people are developing technology and innovation to adapt and control their environment. Malay sailors developed the lateen sails to harness the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean. The camel saddle makes trade across the Saharan desert much more easy. You also have the Silk Road and the development of caravanserai, or like, little motels. We also see the development of a lot of infrastructure to, again, help promote trade. You have the Grand Canal that is massively updated and improved in the Song Dynasty. You have this insane system of roads throughout the Andes Mountains in the Incan Empire. Follow for part 2, we'll talk about agriculture and urbanization. Welcome to part 2. In the last video, we talked about states developing technology and innovation to control and adapt to the environment in the post-classical era. Today, we're going to talk about agriculture. The other category of new innovations is going to relate to agriculture and growing food more efficiently. In the Incan Empire, they developed waru, or this insane terrace agriculture that allows them to grow crops at like 11,000 feet in altitude. You have chinampas, or floating gardens, in the Aztec Empire. A little ice age in the northern Atlantic necessitates new agricultural efficiency in medieval Europe with the heavy plow and the three-field system. And all of this leads to rising production of crops like maize in Mesoamerica, potatoes, for example, in the Incan Empire. You have sugar that's coming from the Middle East into Europe, bananas coming from Southeast Asia over to sub-Saharan Africa, and then kind of most famously champa rice, which leads to population increase in the Song Dynasty. So as agriculture gets more efficient and more productive, population is going to increase, and this is going to lead to the rise of sophisticated urban centers all around the world. Hey, we're talking about culture in the post-classical era, and first we're focusing on the fact that states and regions were united by belief systems. So I've already kind of talked about that, and so one thing to notice is that the religion that spreads the fastest during this time period is Islam, and it also faces kind of local movements like the Bhakti movement from southern India, which is somewhat of like a Hindu revival movement to kind of combat the arrival of Islam on the subcontinent. Religion in most places is the main institution that dominates political and social life. You have ritual sacrifice across the Americas. You have monasteries and cathedrals providing some semblance of unity during the Middle Ages. You also just have monumental architecture built by the state to glorify their religion. You have madrasas, or Islamic universities, built by Mansa Musa in Timbuktu. You have these beautiful coral mosques along the Swahili coast. You have the Qutb Minhar, which takes literally the stones from a Hindu temple and then builds an Islamic mosque and minaret. But obviously, being devoutly religious can come with its own problems. You have the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. You have the schism between the Catholic and the Orthodox Christian churches. In the Song Dynasty, there's a backlash against the growing influence of Buddhism and Taoism, which leads to the creation of Neo-Confucianism. Last video, we talked about unifying belief systems across regions of the post-classical era, but it's not all about religion. Many civilizations are going to experience a golden age of art, architecture, and literature, partly thanks to cultural diffusion across those trade routes. The two big examples are going to be the Middle East, which just has this explosion of culture. You have poetry like Rumi, you have the translation movement from the House of Wisdom, you have the development of Arabesque architecture and art styles. In the Song Dynasty, you have rising urbanization and a state that's sponsoring innovation, which leads to an explosion of like print, especially poetry. You have more universities, you have like a rising urban culture. The Khmer build this beautiful Hindu-Buddhist temple of Angkor Wat. In Muslim Spain, you have this massive library at Cordoba. The Inca are straight up geniuses and develop things like quipu, which is a unique form of record keeping that involves tying knots in ropes. They develop forms of earthquake-proof architecture, huge golden statues and fields of like life-size golden llamas. It's amazing. Next up, culture spreads. AP World, we finally made it to economics of the post-classical era. So Afro-Eurasia grew more interconnected thanks to interregional networks of exchange. The largest and most important of those trade routes is going to be the Indian Ocean, which is able to transport both luxury items and common goods like spices or stonework or horses. And that is because, my friends, boats can carry more than camels. Maybe most famously, you have the Silk Road, which really is exclusively luxury items. Again, camels can't carry that much. And thank you, Mongols, for making that Silk Road system way safer. And then finally, you have the Trans-Saharan trade, which links sub-Saharan Africa and gold, salt, ivory, enslaved people with the rest of Afro-Eurasia. Thanks, camel saddles. We don't talk about this as much, but there was a smaller, more scattered trans-regional trade network across the Americas. Like, we see evidence of trade from South America up into like the American Southwest. But all of this was done by human labor because they don't have domesticated animals. So it's slower, and it's really just exclusively for like very, very, very rare luxury goods. Next up, economic innovations and change. Okay, so we established the main trade routes of the post-classical era. Now let's talk about what is new. Now, a lot of these trade routes are able to grow so large in this time period because of economic innovations. For example, you have flying cash. In the Song Dynasty, you have the development of modern banking and bills of exchange, partly to fund crusaders going to the Holy Land. Weirdly, in the Incan Empire, they're an exception because they don't have currency at all. Many other states operate off of a tributary system like the Aztec, the Majapahit, China. Medieval Europe is the most isolated and behind the times. They're still mostly on manors, but But we are going to see the rise of a growing interconnected economy in Europe. First in Italy, thanks to, again, the Crusaders and the rise of the banking industry, which is dominated mostly by Jewish refugees. And then we also are going to see the rise of a Northern European trading alliance called the Hanseatic League. On to the early modern era.